He who has believed and has been baptized shall be saved, but he who has disbelieved shall be condemned. These signs will follow those or accompany those who have believed in my name, and they will cast out demons and they will speak in new tongues. Now, I don't know if you can see what's on the screen.
Okay.
I've got a question. What type of tongues, what tongues is he speaking of in Mark 16:17?
The infilling, the baptism of the Holy Spirit that Peter said, this is for all of you. This what you see happening right now, the promise is unto you and your children and all afar off. I'll pour out my spirit upon all flesh. So what you see happening is God's spirit being poured upon all flesh. And the evidence was tongues.
Okay, guys, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I ran across this video. If you hadn't seen the I don't know if you call it a debate or conversation or whatever it was between Corey and Marcus Rogers, I gotta admit, guys, this was a little hard for me. It was hard for me to watch. Normally, Marcus Rogers is one of those, it's just very hard to watch as is because of his mannerisms, kind of the way he approaches things. But this was a little bit harder, not so much on Marcus's side. This was actually on my guy Corey's side, and I'm a Corey fan. But this is hard to watch. So for the first time, I really felt like Corey didn't really present kind of the best space. If two Christian brothers are going to talk, you want to make sure that you have the right atmosphere so that, you know, whoever's being corrected and whoever's correcting can both be in a manner to receive. Here's the reality of it. I don't really care so much about that. Let's talk about Mark 16, because that's what he continues to butcher. That's what the conversation is about. I think Corey was getting a little frustrated because he felt like he wasn't answering the question. Marcus was getting frustrated because he felt like Corey wasn't hearing him and listening to him. And it just became this back and forth that to me was useless. There was no fruit that came out of it, in my opinion, unless you're looking at anybody on the outside that could have gotten it. And I just didn't see that in the comments, where you had, you know, people on Marcus's side saying, well, you know, maybe he's making sense, or, you know, vice versa. Now, I will say this. Out of the two, Corey was 100% correct when it comes to the Bible and what his position was. He was 100% correct. Marcus was 100% incorrect. But again, that's nothing out of the norm. So let's get into Mark 16 and let's understand the difference between what Marcus is interpreting and what the Bible actually says when you add context to this chapter. So jumping into it, how would I have approached this? Because everybody says they would approach it, you know, differently. Everybody thinks they can manage better than the manager. Sometimes that's true. In most cases, it's not. It's easy to say what you would do when you're not actually in the situation. Now, I'm saying that to say that if I were in Corey's position, I would have approached it differently. But again, when you're in the midst of it, you're not seeing it that way. And it's easy to kind of get caught up into the emotions of it all. So I think that here's some obvious things. There's a vast difference in Bible knowledge and Bible training between Corey and Marcus, right? We know this. Anybody out there that's heard the two of them talk about the Bible knows that, right? And so I think with that in mind, it's best to just break it down into more of a layman's term, more of a, I wouldn't say elementary, because Marcus, I believe, is well above elementary. But you got to break the context of this down into something that's a little bit more meaningful and maybe down to earth for someone who isn't professionally trained in hermeneutics, right? So middle school, English class, you know, whatever it might be, what we want to do is we want to understand what the topic of Mark 16 is, who's talking, who's the audience, etc., etc. For me, understanding Mark 16 and 17 and Mark 16 and 15 means that at the very least, you've got to go back to verse 9. But I think it's best to start at verse 1 to truly get the best opportunity to understand verse 17. Okay, and what I'll do here is to make this a little bit simpler. When we get to the pronouns throughout this chapter, I'm going to connect names to the pronouns so that you can get a little bit better understanding. What we're trying to do here is to tell the story from the perspective of context and not from what we want it to be, right? So from Marcus's view, when it says that they will speak in tongues, they will do this or whatever the case, he's saying they is everybody. Everybody who accepts Jesus, gets baptized, will get this. But here's the thing, they have to do those two things in order to have that. Problem is, I know people right now that haven't been baptized, but they say they can speak in tongues. So what is it, right? So again, that's kind of where, again, some of the contradictions come in. So when it says he, or it says them, or you, I'm going to tie that back to that pronoun, back to the person or persons that it actually belongs to. So it's going to take a little bit longer to read through the chapter. But when I add the name where the pronoun should be, I'm hoping it'll make it a little bit more simplistic for you. All right. So starting at verse 1, it says this. Now, when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices that they might come and anoint Jesus. Very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, they, which is Mary, and Salome, I know, sounds like a law firm, but very early in the morning, when Mary Magdalene, Mary mother of James, and Salome, aka the ladies, that's who the three of them are going to be the ladies, when the ladies came to the tomb when the sun had risen, and the ladies said among themselves, who will roll away the stone from the door of the tomb for us? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, for it was very large. And entering the tomb, the ladies saw a young man clothed in a long white robe, aka the angel. The angels clothed in a long white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But the angel said to the ladies, do not be alarmed. You ladies seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. Jesus is risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him. Now here, they, who is they that laid him? This was actually Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. Those are the ones who laid him to rest in Nicodemus's tomb. So you can find that if you go back to John 19, verses 38 through 42. It talks about who actually came and got the body of Jesus from, I believe it was Pilate. Okay, so back to verse 7. It says, but go. It says, but go, tell Jesus' disciples and Peter that Jesus is going before you. Now let's stop here really quick. Let's take a quick pause here. Who is you here that Jesus is going before you? Who is you? Now, if you aren't reading this correctly, you might link you to maybe the ladies, right? Because he's saying you, and you're saying, well, he's talking to the ladies. But no, that would be incorrect. The angel here is telling the ladies exactly what to say to the disciples. So in other words, the angel is saying to the ladies, go to the disciples and Peter and say this exact statement to them. So when Mary and Salome get to the disciples and Peter, this is a statement they're repeating. They're saying, hey, Peter, hey, disciples, this angel told me to tell you that. And then you get into verse 7. Jesus is going before you into Galilee. He's going before you, disciples, into Galilee. There you guys will see him, as he said to you. In other words, he told you before he got crucified that he was going to do this. All right, verse 8, very important. Highly missed information here. So the ladies went out quickly and fled from the tomb, for they trembled and were amazed. Pay attention to what happens next. And the ladies said nothing to anyone. Why? For they were afraid. Okay, so everything that the message that the angels gave the ladies never got back to the disciples. This means that up to verse 8, the disciples still don't know that Jesus is risen. Okay, hope you're following. So this helps you understand what Jesus does next. Verse 9. Now, when Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, Jesus appeared first to who? Mary Magdalene, out of whom Jesus had cast 7 demons. So Jesus went first to someone that he had a special relationship with, whose faith he knew would not waver. Verse 10. Mary Magdalene then went and told those who had been with him as the disciples mourned and wept. So she went and told the disciples that Jesus was alive and had been seen by her. And look at what the disciples did. The disciples did not believe. I want you to keep these words at the forefront of your mind for the rest of this video. They did not believe. These are extremely important words for you to understand. This is where Marcus is getting it wrong. Verse 12. After that, Jesus appeared in another form to 2 of the disciples as they walked into the country. And the 2 disciples went and they told it to the rest, but the 11 disciples what? Did not believe the 2 disciples either. That's twice they didn't believe. So what's the issue here so far? The disciples are being told from eyewitness accounts of Jesus being alive, being risen from the grave, and they don't have enough faith in the people that are around them to believe what these people saw. They have a lack of belief. So watch what Jesus does next. Verse 14. Later, Jesus appeared to the 11 as they sat at a table. Look at what he does. And he rebuked them for what? Unbelief and hardness of heart, because they did not believe those who had seen Jesus after he had risen. So up to this point, we have context of chapter 16. Jesus was supposed to be dead. The disciples are mourning and crying over his death, even though he told them that he would actually go, die, and rise again. He had told them before it happened, but they did not believe. Okay? So here we go. This is where verse 17 gets in. So we have context. So let's quickly summarize just so you have it up. So when we hit 17, you'll know. So from verse 1, the ladies go to the tomb to anoint Jesus. They get there. Jesus isn't there. The angels tells them to go back to the disciples and to Peter and tell them that Jesus is alive and he's going to go ahead of them and get to Galilee. They run away afraid. Then Jesus appears on the first day of the week to Mary Magdalene. She actually does go and tell the disciples, hey, I saw Jesus, but they don't believe her. Then Jesus appears to 2 more of the disciples who go back and tell them, hey, we just saw Jesus. And they're like, I don't believe you either. Now, when Jesus appears to them, what does he do? He rebukes them for what? Not believing, because they had hardness of heart, right? So knowing all of this, watch how verse 15 sounds now with the understanding of the topic at hand, which is what? Unbelief by who? The disciples. The disciples have unbelief. Okay? We'll start at 14 just so we can kind of flow it in, but let's check this out. It says, later, he, Jesus, appeared to the 11 as they sat at the table. He rebuked their unbelief and hardness of heart because they did not believe those who had seen him after he had risen. And Jesus said to the 11 disciples, let's stop. Hold on. When you're on a subject, when you're talking about a topic and you add and in there, that means that and, whatever's in the next part of that sentence, is connected to the topic. Okay? So when you're starting back at 14, later he appeared to the 11 as they sat at the table, and he rebuked their unbelief and hardness of heart because they did not believe those who had seen him after he had risen. And Jesus, right? So it's still going on that same topic. And Jesus said to the 11 disciples, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will follow those who believe. Who did not believe? How do we go from talking about the disciples this entire chapter, and then all of a sudden Jesus says, oh, forget about what I'm talking about with you guys and the issues that I have with you guys, the reason I rebuke, let's throw all that aside and let's talk about everybody that's coming after the fact. I've asked you to do something. Go out, preach the gospel to all creatures. Those who believe, one thing, those who do not believe will be condemned, and these signs will follow those who believe. Which one of you guys are going to believe in me? In my name, they. Who is they? You cannot go and replace the pronoun they with people in the church today. You cannot do that because they is still part of the topic of conversation. This is where reading comprehension, and I'm not saying this in a mean way, but reading comprehension should be fundamental here. You can't go and then reapply the pronoun they to somebody completely different when all the pronouns in this chapter have been accounted for. They here is talking about one of the people in this chapter. It's either Jesus, it can be Jesus, it could be Mary Magdalene, it could be Mary Mother James, it could be Salome, it could be Nicodemus, it could be the disciples, it could be Peter, it could be, who is that? What was the last person I'm missing? Joseph of Arimathea, or it could be Nicodemus. So it could be one of the people that have been talked about in this chapter. But you can't go and add somebody new to the conversation, and then everything all of a sudden makes completely. You can't do that. So in my name, the people that believe out of you guys that I'm talking to, whichever one of you guys believe in me, will be able to, in my name, cast out demons. You, whichever one of you disciples believe, will speak with new tongues. They will take up serpents, and if they drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt them. They will lay hands on the sick, and they will recover. Okay? The context of these verses is confirmed if you just continue to actually read past 17 and 18. Because if you go to 19, it says this: so then, after the Lord had spoken to them, the disciples only, he was received up into heaven and sat down at the right hand of God. And the disciples went out and preached everywhere, the Lord working through with them. Is them all of us, or is them the disciples? And the disciples went out and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word through the accompanying signs of them, not everybody else. Here's the deal. This channel is about bringing back some very common sense reading comprehension. The Bible is really not that hard to read, most of it. There are some areas that are a little bit more difficult if you're getting into the prophecy, especially Revelation. Revelation is going to be debated till the end of time. There's just not enough information there to truly get a 1000% understanding of what's going to happen in Revelations, right? So let me not digress. But there are some areas of the Bible that are a little bit more difficult to read. You've got to do more research. But at the end of the day, I'd probably say 98% of the Bible is not hard to read. It's not. It's interesting because you read every single other book out there normally. And I say this all the time. For those of you guys who love reading, you'll pick up a book, you start in chapter 1, at the very first word, and you read it from the very first word all the way to the end. I have never seen somebody come in and pick up a normal chapter book or a novel and start on page 68 and read through 3 chapters and then jump to chapter 14 and read through 3 sentences and then come back to page 6. And you don't do that with anything. People that go to the movies don't even go to the movies at the end and then try to catch it at the beginning. And then you go to the movie to see it from beginning to end because that is how it's built. That's how the storyline is built. But, the infamous Mark 16 was for the disciples specifically to give them more credibility in preaching the gospel because they were going out on their own. Jesus had ascended. So you don't have the person that made all the waves there with you. The people that had experienced Jesus knew Jesus. So they were following him in crowds and multitudes. Now you just have his disciples doing it, and they've got to be able to give the same credibility to, hey, this Jesus that you saw, this Jesus that we talked about has risen. He's no longer in that grave. Remember that they thought, I think it was the Pharisees were under the impression that his body was going to be stolen or pulled from the tomb, and so they could make it seem like he had risen. And so they needed more credibility. So Jesus says, hey, those of you who are willing to believe in who I am, I'm going to give you this authority in my name. But it's only for those disciples to go out and actually build the church. It's not for us today. You can't take all of that and apply that to us today. It doesn't make any sense. It's interesting how he talks about, and I'm talking Marcus, you talk about casting out demons, you talk about speaking in tongues, and you might talk about healing, but you never talk about picking up the serpents or drinking anything deadly. You don't want to talk about those things. And if those things apply, they must apply to everyone. But now you're saying that if it doesn't apply to you, maybe it's because you were saved, but you never baptized. Well, now that means that salvation is works-based because I have to be baptized in order to get this salvation. That's contradicting. So everything about his view on this and most other scriptures is a little off because he's taken it out of context to fit his agenda. So that's where I stand with it. Mark 16 means something very different than what was actually portrayed. In terms of the two of them in this video, I think it could have been done better. I think we have enough issues with how the world sees us as Christians than to be out here on these platforms and over talking each other. And one person's frustrated. I actually do get why Marcus was frustrated. Part of it is his fault. Part of it is in my opinion, on Corey's. Corey's got to have a little bit more patience, because he's at a different level than Marcus in terms of the teaching, right? So you got to have more patience. You got to have a little bit more grace with Marcus. Marcus can't get upset when somebody's asking the same question over and over again because you're not answering it. And so again, I just think that I don't know if this was the right forum for the two. They tried this once before, it didn't go that well. So at this point, I would be trying to have a one-on-one conversation off the books, off the record, and then you're just trying to impart him with the information. Now, what he does with that once he has the truth, it's not your job. That's between him, the Holy Spirit, and God. You have no. Corey would have done his job if he had given him the information, and Marcus said, "You know what? I can see where you're going through. I understand, and I would like to understand more." You've given him the understanding. You've tried to teach him the way it's going. If he accepts it, great. If he doesn't, he doesn't. On the other side of that, if he doesn't, now you're concerned about the people following. And I see that's where Corey's coming in and saying, hey, let me do this publicly. Because it's not about you, Marcus. This is about the people that are following you that are lost. So it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one for me. I didn't like watching it, though. That was rough. So Mark 16, let me know what you think on it. Hopefully I got it. I'm pretty confident. I'm not going to get cocky and say that I am 1,000% confident, but just based off the context, I'm pretty confident that, reading it in context is exactly what I said. It's not for the church. It's not for believers in general. This was for the disciples to help to build the church in the absence of Jesus, who had just ascended to be at the right hand of God. All right. So talk to you guys later. See ya.